Hello, good morning. I just wondering how is the sound today? If you can respond to me. Do you hear me okay?
Okay.
Okay, I just wondering about sound.
Of course.
So you wanna go?
Yeah. Can I come? Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello. Okay, put this here.
Good morning. Wait. Maybe no sound. Okay.
One second. Yes. We've gotten more and more disorganized as time goes on. I think it's so difficult to do all of this somehow. It seems so high, this chair. Yeah, it's a little better. Okay. These have become more and more informal as well, I think. So how are we doing?
Good today.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I will try to speak loudly. Am I okay? Yeah? All right. So we can actually begin?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. Well, welcome everyone once again. It's already well into September. This is incredible. And sorry about that, but I need this so badly. So on the one hand, it seems like everything just standing still. On the other hand, many things are actually happening. Of course, the United States has reached over 1 million confirmed COVID-19 cases. What am I talking about? Well, I think I need more coffee. A little bit. More than 7 million confirmed cases. That's almost the population of New York City, of course. And is over 200,000 cases. Actually, 2,000. Oh, I'm really not doing well. Let me sort of get myself settled. And, my problem is I decided to be more efficient rather than trust my memory to use a kind of little prompter here. That's the big problem. It's much better for me just to use my memory. Okay, so I'll use my internal prompter now. So the United States also is fast approaching 208,000 fatalities. So it's so far winning the world race in terms of the numbers killed by the virus. Okay, and yeah, I know I'm going down. And despite all of this, we have a government who's telling us that they are doing an incredible job. And they're blaming other countries and showing how the United States is so much better than other countries in the world. And many people in the United States hear this and accept this because they don't know about the world. And this has a lot to do with our news and a lot of the fake news, social media, which has, rather than united people, has actually segmented people into groups which are sort of self-enclosed and actually have self-fulfilling ideas. They sort of feed on themselves and do not actually look at any kind of larger picture. I was reading the New York Times briefly this morning. Maybe that's why I was late, perhaps. I apologize for that. Can you hear me? I don't think I'm speaking loudly enough. It's okay? Okay, please always mention when you can't hear me and I will beef up my voice. I can do that if I need to. And there was an op-ed by Krugman, who often has interesting things about Stalin and Lysenko. Lysenko was Stalin's favorite scientist, we can say. He's a biologist who did not believe in Darwinian evolution. He had his own way. And that became policy. So that dissenters actually were imprisoned, they were executed, and what this policy did was it very much led to the, famines in the 1930s in the Soviet Union at that time. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because nowadays we have something, although not perhaps on the scale of that kind of terror, but we have something which is very similar. It's this propagation, I should say, of fake news. And you have, for instance, our president announcing that he may reject the recommendations for safety, I should say, for assuring the safety of vaccines for COVID-19 that the FDA will put out, because he says they will be politicized. Okay. Now, this is rather interesting to me, because this is the typical way that what we can, in social science, call the bully behaves. The sense is that you take something that you are doing and you project it onto your opponent. So that is what is actually happening now, because of course Trump's, or our president's, rejection of CDC guidelines before this, and now his possible rejection of FDA guidelines is, in essence, political itself, of course, and has nothing to do with actual science or even with the concern for people's health. Now this also reminds me of how one's political agenda can be incredibly detrimental to the world, let's say, and at the same time is finally maybe completely beside the point in terms of what is happening. In other words, nature, the world goes on its way regardless of what people think. And the talk about the article, I should say, about Lysenko reminded me of Giordano Bruno. Once I mentioned him before, who had the audacity at the time to say that the Earth, perhaps, is not the center of the solar system, not the center of the universe, and also that the Earth may not be the only seat of life in the universe, that we may not be alone, but there may be many other forms of life in many different places in the cosmos. Of course, for that he was burned at the stake, but what he said actually finally we find is in a way true. Okay, this is it's a, as I said this week, it was, yes, I know, I always have to go, but it takes me a long time. It takes me longer and longer to get warmed up to what I'm supposed to be doing here, and I need to think about things in a kind of global way. And please bear with me as I talk to the phone here. And imagine that there are people out there actually paying attention to my incoherent rantings. Okay, so just a week ago, the brilliant and very, very important Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, and that has created a very dangerous state in the United States as Republicans are pressing for an appointment to fill the vacant place before our election. And that is in spite of tradition that you do not fill the vacancy in the Supreme Court during an election year, which, of course, in Obama's final year, was something that the Republicans insisted on, and so Obama's appointment of Gorsuch was not able to be confirmed. So we see that we have a party, I don't even think it's a party, maybe it's a cult, of people who are simply bent on maintaining power, achieving more power, and not so much in actually governing. So, what does this all have to do with music? Actually, very little, but there is something there in our little world, as you can see, and this is my topic today. And I'm continuing from last week where I talked about original versions, early versions, and the idea that revision can be for many different reasons. There's revision that comes from an actual understanding that something is not quite working and needs to be fixed. There's revision that comes from finding that, for instance, you have a new note in an instrument. This is in early days, perhaps, or a new technique that's possible and can be used for this. And there's revision which takes place for simply practical reasons. Now, today, I was going to look at Copeland first to continue with what we were doing, but I'm going to do that at the end, actually. And I know, but I have to. I keep on being encouraged to move on, but which I will. Okay, so what I want to go on to now is from this idea of revision to the idea, looking at a piece and seeing from internal evidence what the composer actually wrote, let's say, what is correct and what is not correct. And this is actually rather dangerous. It's also dangerous to avoid this, actually perhaps more dangerous. But we do have situations, many situations, where you do not have adequate external evidence, we can say. And external evidence, I mean an actual revision of notes in the composer's hand, for instance, or even things like a letter saying that, oh yes, this should be so such and such, etc., etc. And yet we have some kind of ambiguous issue in the piece of music that we are looking at. Uh-oh. That's yes. Hopefully someone wasn't thrown out of the window here. So I'm going to look at a few pieces with this in mind. And actually, I also want to look at these pieces because you can look at internal evidence and you can look at it in various ways. You can look at something in a very superficial way, or you can dig a little bit deeper and perhaps find a result which either makes more sense or is simply more interesting. Okay, so how do I start? I have some music here and I'm trying to think what I'm going to start with. Yeah, I will start actually. It's a kind of private joke, thanks. Although, should I do this first? I was going to do this later, but we've been looking for ways of exercising the embouchure. And we found different kinds of contraptions. So I just want to demonstrate one of them. This was going to be, I think, next week live stream, which is going to move on to actual nitty-gritty techniques of playing. Yeah, but here goes.
Are you sure? Oh no.
Here. Oh. There.
Oh no.
I know, it's ridiculous. This is actually not so terrible as you can exercise your legs. Okay, enough of that. I will demonstrate this in more detail later, but I just thought somehow that we had to break this sort of very doleful train of thought that I've been having, at least for a moment. Okay, so actually, I think I will begin with the sonata by Edison Denisov. I had a lot of things planned, but I also have to apologize because I spent all night pretty much looking for stuff which I couldn't find, which had to do with a few scores and actually had to do with a wonderful article by Charles Rosen, whose name I mention quite often. So hopefully I will have this stuff at some point very soon. But at the moment I don't have it. So I will just stick to what I know very well and to sort of clear examples for our clarinet public. Okay, so this is the sonata of Edison Denisov. I've talked about this earlier. Okay, and so here, let me go. I need to put my prompter away momentarily, which I realized it's really just a handicap and not something that makes life easier. And since I'm going to actually play something, I have to get sorry. You see.
Sorry.
Yes. This is a. It's all a matter of diminishing returns. And I should also get some music more, I think, for this. Okay. Excuse me, I say. Here, this must be. Yes. Just take this one. Thank you. Yeah, because I forgot. Here, okay. So, this was the first Western publication of the Denisov Sonata by Gehrig. It's a kind of a interesting little publisher, sort of worked in the basement. And this here, oh no, oh, it's awful. Here we are. Oh God. Here we go. Here. I don't know why you even put up with this, everyone. This is the manuscript which he gave me, which I've shown earlier. Okay, you can see that. Gehrig was taken over by Breitkopf, and that's the edition that basically people have now. And we can see a few things. I'm going to go just to the beginning, but then I want to spend more time on the second movement, just one detail. There's, of course, the first movement, for those of you who know this piece, have these quarter tones, which actually sort of creep up or creep down in a very kind of soulful, I would say, way. But you have things like this. Can you see? I should, yeah? Where we have two B flats there. Okay? You have something else also. which is well, I see this was corrected, but in Breitkopf that's it. You had that D flat there. Okay. And there are a few more of these here. I'm not going to bother with them. But I hear generally when people play this and they don't know better that they actually just play what's on the page without looking at internal evidence of structure. So, oh, it's not there, Mike. I'm totally disoriented. I think it's here that I want. Yeah, I think this is good. Okay. Wow, this reed is totally falling apart. Okay. I'm probably mumbling a bit.
There was only 2 clarinets in my house, but seems like a clarinets for 100 people.
In fact, that's almost right. Okay, now see if this reed. What is this reed? Wow, paper thin. But it will work for what I need, I think. Okay. So, if we look at this piece, we see that everything works in a very systematic way, where we have, as I look later, so it's all in these cells which have a half step, whole step of stolas. So we can look at this as involving either what we can call a diminished scale, an octatonic scale, or Oliver Messiaen's third mode of, I think it's third, isn't it? Third mode of limited transposition. Or the second mode, maybe. Third. You can, guys, all of you can find out which mode it is. That's why. So, then the quarter tones actually compress this. So we have so we also have quarter tones in between. But one thing that, if we notice clearly, unless you have a kind of this sort of parlando gesture where he repeats which is sort of an extension of one note, which then that way, and then he has quarter tones. Uh-oh, this is sticking. I need one of you to come and repair my clarinets. This is this lockdown, pandemic, etc., has really wreaked havoc on much, including my piano. That's terrible. Okay, so here we look at this, and we have this. And then comes on, this is all fine. And then we have this. Oh. Now that should, if you see this and look at the internal evidence of how Denisov is composing this, that should ring a bell saying that, oh, maybe there's something wrong. And in fact it is. And we look at his manuscript, if I don't actually And we see this same place right here. You see that? Can tell me what I should do. Do you see? There we have the quarter tone higher. Right here.
Oh.
Right where my finger is. Okay. Do you find it? Okay. Well, what? Just trust me on this. Which, of course. Wow, this is embarrassingly bad. Okay, but so if you have a kind of critical point of view, I should say, or critical relationship with the music, you will go and see, oh yes, that's it. Okay. Now I go to just the second movement, and this is something that has been a matter of not discussion, but kind of a little bit argument with people that I've had. And this is this section here, and I'll show it to you in the manuscript first. This is this middle part, which is here. If we can see it. Can you see that? Okay. And then let's look at the end of that. It's right here. If you can find it. You see where I'm pointing my finger. That's a B natural. And then it comes back to here, and that is a B flat. Okay. Now, what's published and what is generally played, for instance, is here. This is the same place, B flat, you see, and then here, you see that? Another B flat. Do you find it? Yeah, that's okay. Good. All right. And I've had discussions with many people that says, no, but of course, you know, the B, because it continues B flat, etc., it should be B flat. Now, this is an example of looking at internal evidence in a very superficial way. So, the same note, so it must be the same note. But not trying to understand what is actually happening in the piece. And for that, we go back to the very beginning of the piece, here, and we have this motive. You see how he moves that way. And, of course, he also does this backwards and in different ways. So, that way. And that expands to this kind of whole step, half step, whole step, half step kind of writing that he does. Now we look at this part here, and let me show you again. And we see how he connects these. And I don't have to show you all of this because he's actually doing this throughout. And sometimes he actually superimposes one and another this way, but it's always this kind of coupling of this motive here. And here we have, see, I don't know if you can see, A, B natural, B flat. Uh-huh. B flat's a little out of tune, but this clarinet needs to be warmed up. So, that is clear. It's not simply that Denisov in his manuscript made a mistake, but this is clearly important in the structure of the piece. That way I can go on and show more in greater detail why it is, but in this whole middle section we have, should I play it? That's my question. Maybe I play it. What do you think? It's because its middle section is so fascinating. But I need the music for that now. One time I didn't, but I don't trust myself at the moment with this piece. I haven't played it for so long. So anyway, let's say, where do I take it from? That's it. And that B natural makes this place special. The way it is. And I play with a B flat. Now, just the ending, why not? So, I should go from here. Not interesting. Let's see. So, we have to look for internal evidence, but we have to look for it in an intelligent way. Now I will move on to another very interesting problem that we have, and something I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to focus on this now just to show why, for instance, I am convinced of a particular thing. Okay. And we go now to Brahms. Go here. And this is a, well, be careful, we have that. This is here. Okay. I was going to look at the Fourth Symphony, but I decided just to look at this. I think that this is one of the most fascinating little problems that we have in looking at what could be in music. Okay. And this is a case where we actually don't know what Brahms actually meant. Should I? No, actually, I want to do two things. I even though I did this, I'm going to go first to one place in the second movement, which is wrong in every single edition.
Second movement of what?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, of the E-flat Sonata. This is Opus 120, number 2. Okay, and it's the reprise of this. We have this on. We have this. And that way. And there's something which had always disturbed me, and for those of you who have heard about this a lot from me, my apologies, but anyway, it's when it comes back, it's different in every edition in a very subtle way. The clarinet part is exactly the same, but this is this way, not this way. Too many thises, right? Here is the opening. Now when it comes back, it's this way. Same, then this way, and then here, that way. So, two things are different in it. First of all, as he does originally, so we have that, which of course explains the connection to the middle part of the movement. So that's very important in the beginning, but at the end I don't understand a reason why it would not be there. That always disturbed me a little. Now what did disturb me more though was this. And then we have with that, which creates an, which I always felt was rather unpleasant. And of course many pianists don't even notice it and play with the G flat instead of the D flat there. You see, this is, I should explain a little more carefully. We have a G flat here, B flat, then here, G flat, that's a B flat, and then that way. So that the clarinet part is actually in the clear, rather than having that there. Now that was in the Stichverlag, in other words, this change, which is the fair copy made for the publication. That's in the first edition, and in every single edition since then, except for my edition. Okay, now, I guess I have to plug my own stuff a bit. Yeah, I don't generally do that, but perhaps I should. But now, remember I mentioned earlier how there are working manuscripts of these pieces, and they're fascinating and very important. They're very important for Brahms scholarship in general. And what do we see? We see that Brahms did not actually write this part out. He wrote the clarinet part out in the reprise. So here, he has this written out. There, and then he has the clarinet part. And the reason he has that is because he changed that to there. That's a difference from the opening. Otherwise, he would not have bothered to write that out either. But the piano part is not written out. All he does is a symbol saying, go back to the beginning and repeat that. And that makes perfect sense because it's the same. And this is not something that is unique to Brahms, or it's not, even we can say, a symptom of laziness or some kind of nonsense like that. It is very standard for composers, and if any of you do compose, you will understand why this makes sense, because you don't want to spend the time simply copying things because you're busy with projects, etc., etc. You want to go on, so you refer back to places. And of course, we see in earlier scores, for instance, Mozart doing that in great detail, and then it's the job of the copyist to actually fill those in. So you don't have that. So in fact, what Brahms had in mind is the same.
So you're saying it should be the same in...
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And that makes sense internally, because I cannot believe Brahms changing to that. You know, this is kind of internal evidence which is simply recognizing the professionalism of the composer. That's the way. Okay, now I go to the interesting part. This was interesting only because everybody has it wrong. But here in the variations movement, we have a bit of a dilemma, and that is in the fourth variation, which of course we start. Etc., etc. Now, coming to the end of that, we have here, and let me get another version, another edition, if I can find it with not too much difficulty. Yeah, here we go. This is here. Okay. This is the variation. Starts here and goes throughout to here. And the part that interests us is right here. You see? There's a C natural here, but before that, there is a C flat. Okay? Do we see that? Okay. Now that always went this way then. And then going on. Is that way. It's very nice. But it turns out that neither in the manuscript, neither in the early manuscript, nor in fact, the Stichtverlag, nor in the first edition, do we have a natural in front of that second C. So the question is whether it could be this. And then so badly for it. But it could be this with C flat. This is problematic though, because, for instance, he does not write necessarily, he does not, I should say, correct the accidentals in places right before this. Perhaps I don't go through here. There's one case here, for instance, which is done in the printed, but he did not correct in this place for here. Then we have, and then we have this. It should be that, but he doesn't rewrite. You have the B natural here, but here he didn't write a flat. But of course, that's absurd. So it has to be that way. And there's another example of this also, where he doesn't actually correct the note. Yeah. So it is very possible that that can be just a C natural, and he just didn't correct it because he has a change of clef. So this part, G clef, and then here, if it's here, is in the bass clef. So this is possible, but why would I think, for instance, that that should be a C flat? And for that, we have to go to the beginning of the movement here, and we see that he begins to actually emphasize a kind of the flatness here. Emphasize flatness, that's a funny thing. So here we have this going here. Then we have so right at that point, it's not minor, but all of a sudden, rather than, and there's our C flat from in the very beginning. Okay, and here we have again here. And then C natural. I need to do a G flat. I'm very sorry. Let me do this again. The clarinet part. This is the end of the first variation. Is that way, and we have here. C flat, C natural. Etc. Now the third movement.
Third variation.
With the second variation, right? Third movement. The end of that, actually, he changes his focus a little bit, which, of course, because he's Brahms, makes perfect sense. And instead, what we have is this. At the end, this is. So he has the C natural there, but what happens here is this. He goes into C minor. So in other words, all of a sudden he goes into minor there. Now the next variation, this is the one which I think actually, what do we say in English? This is the clinker or something like that, where, this is exactly why I really believe that this is C flat. And this is what it is. From here, we have this. And then we have, this is all normal. Then, sorry, with the E flat. And then we go on, again, E flat, again, A flat major. Then all of a sudden, A flat minor to E flat. So what happens in this variation is everything is so wow, it's just so nice, and then all of a sudden this is it's like, oh, what happened? Where is everyone? And then even here, there's C flat again, and finally that. Okay. So, in this next variation, that sudden A flat minor is like, comes back in a very subtle way, but very poignant way. So we have here, and then, we're going on, then, I think it's brilliant. And what is also interesting, I just do from this edition, it's easier than getting the manuscript out that I have. But you see that he writes big deal at this moment with these hairpins, diminuendo. He writes another collando here, and what I have in my edition comes from, this is in the score, manuscript score is like that, which is very similar, except it goes through farther there, and in the clarinet part, it's like that, you see. But in any case, this is for Brahms, who was rather reticent about overmarking passages. This is very complicated, as he writes both the hairpins, which have to do with time, plus the diminuendo. So I play once again, and we go from here. C flat, then again C flat, again So, I may be totally wrong about this. You know, maybe Brahms comes back to me in a dream and says, "Are you kidding? I didn't mean that at all. I just thought it should be C natural and just go on in a very nice, lively manner." But perhaps I am right. And even if perhaps I'm wrong, this variation becomes something much more significant with that C flat. So it can be called something, and this is what I was looking for. The article of Charles Rosen, I'm always quoting him, where he talks about what he calls mistakes of genius. So it's possible that this was a mistake of genius, but I actually believe that it is something that Brahms intended. For all of you in the audience, you don't have to agree with me. Absolutely fine, but you can try it and feel the significance of these markings that he writes. So they're not there simply for show, and they are very important in terms of delineating the specialness of this all of a sudden A flat minor. You see, and once again, and to close, we see how he develops this minor idea until we have it very clearly at that moment in the variation before that. And of course, the next variation is in minor. I mean, it's not an A flat minor, of course. That would be ridiculous, but it is in minor. That's right. Okay, so this is enough of Brahms here. And I move just very briefly to Stravinsky there. And for that, I will show just a little bit if I didn't You see, I'm so disorganized. Wait. I'm just very disorganized, but maybe I'm not as disorganized as I think I am. But I think I am very disorganized. Okay. I just wanted to show two passages from the original 1920 Symphonies of Winds. Where do I do this? Wow, this is... I apologize so much about this. Careful here. Anyway, okay. Maybe I don't take the time to show this. Yeah, we're doing pretty well with time. We don't... no, it's not there. I took it out. And I put it in a very good place, and I probably... No, but it's not important. This is... Oh.
Too organized.
It's exactly where it should be. Okay. Now this is a very remarkable work. It's the first work where Stravinsky actually uses metric modulations. He does earlier in Svadibka, Lenos, for instance, but he doesn't notate that as metric modulation, which he did here in 1920. Now, why am I showing you this? And this has to do with the problem of looking at things in too systematic a way. So you can also look at internal evidence and have a mindset that corrects things which may be wrong on purpose. Yeah, now you wonder about that. But this actually stemmed from a conversation I had with Elliott Carter about the Symphonies of Winds. And the issue is that there are certain notes which seem to be wrong in this. Here, for instance, I'll show you just one wrong. In the tuba, right here, the tuba has a F flat, It seems wrong. It should be F natural. Okay. And there's another one here. In the alto flute, there's an A flat, then it's followed with an A natural here. Okay. Now there is a revision in 1947 that he wrote, and you would think that maybe that would correct or help decide what is actually right and what is wrong. But the problem with that revision is that he was asked to do this by Boosey and Hawkes, and he did not have his early sketches, basically, for the Symphonies of Winds. So he basically reconstructed the piece from memory that time, and there are many differences, enough differences to make that into, in a certain way, a different piece. But the early version is remarkable, but you cannot compare the two and say that, this is right and this is wrong because of the second version. Okay, that's enough of that. And there are more mistakes, so-called mistakes here. There's even the end. Let me show you that, and this is not the only one. Let me get the very end of the piece. Here, the first troll, there are two B's, but of course if we go here, we see the B goes to the C, to the D. Okay? So that would make sense, and that's also been corrected in something. But in speaking with Elliot Carter about this, he mentioned that, at this time of Stravinsky on purpose wrote notes which seemed wrong. Yeah. And those wrong notes are actually right, and if you correct them, they actually sound wrong. Okay. Now this is, again, a matter of genius, this way, of course. But, in fact, I came to believe that these wrong notes in this are actually right. Okay. And I have to go to a little story I had with I played the trio version of Histoire du Soldat with the great violinist, wonderful musician, Joseph Silverstein, who was a brilliant fellow. And actually was a rather sizable influence on me in certain respects. So anyway, we played together, and that trio version, of course, is full of actual mistakes, which we have to correct. But in the we had the waltz, the little waltz especially, that comes before the ragtime, after the tango. There are certain things to correct, and he corrected everything in a very systematic way, but it ended up not being right. It was too logical, in a sense. But Stravinsky was more interesting in the way he sort of overlapped lines, and I don't spend the time actually showing you this, but this is a danger in trying to correct too much, in a way. Okay, that said, I'm going to correct too much, perhaps. Yeah. And I move now to Debussy. Yeah. And Debussy, it should be here, yeah, okay. Debussy, I...
Oh.
Sorry. This is ornamentation in Baroque. Decided to act up. Was thinking that all this modern music, wow. Okay, back you go. Anyway, now with Debussy, we do have a very early piano manuscript, and that is, of course, in here. Here, I need this because this is very important. Here, I take this out. I just want to get out, take out the manuscript. Yeah, here we are. And this is the early manuscript, which is now available on IMSLP. It's actually it's wonderful that it is. It's housed in the Bibliothèque Nationale that way. And there are certain interesting differences between this early manuscript and what Durand published in 1910 and what actually ended up as the final version in the version for with orchestra, 1911. Okay, but I don't go through those differences. This has to do with these. What original versions can tell us. But just very simply, two things I wanted to say. One has to do with the end of it. And I'm picking this here, and also I'm going to look at the Poulenc Sonata, simply because I've had, I can't say I've had death threats over this, but some people have been very, very upset at my insistence on certain things here. And I just want to show you the sort of reasoning behind this. Okay, now first of all, we have the ending of this, which is this famous ending. In Durand, I just go to the page here. So I show it to you. I mean, of course, you all know that. And we have... And then we have that there. Okay. So, what is wrong with that? Maybe nothing is wrong with that, except this. We have this here. We have this. That's not very Debussy-like, in fact. It's possible that can be Ravel, although generally Ravel would have taken that kind of dissonance and put an octave in between, not in the middle of everything. Okay, so we have that. And then we do actually have some kind of objective evidence for this, which is in his early manuscript here. I show you here. Right there. Notice. I'm so sorry. Can you see it? Here, I don't know why I always forget my chopstick, but you have a natural next to the E. Do you see that? And it's clearly a natural because look at what it looks like. Okay, and let's find a very clear flat. Yeah, well, we can find clear flats here, for instance. You see? Here we go back to the natural. Yeah. And we see that. Okay? So it's emphasizing that. Okay. So that seems clear enough. Now also, you have both the orchestral manuscript and the orchestral first edition score, which is published a year after Durand published the clarinet part, the piano score there. And they are all, of course, is that way. Okay. Now, let's look earlier in the piece, and we see here, we go to the beginning, and even though the piece is in G flat, it begins in the dominant in D flat, with this. So you have D flat, and then he has motion to D natural. And then from there, from this part here, and then he goes from here, that should resolve to this, or to this. And he does. And then he goes right. So he's moved. And we will see this throughout the piece, in fact. So we have this motion up from here, and the ending, of course, and then so if we look at internal evidence, we see that this makes perfect sense, and this makes less sense for it. Okay, it is always possible that a composer can do something very unusual, or like I mentioned with Stravinsky, add wrong notes, which are actually right. Maybe this happened, but the weight of evidence that we have, both internal and from his manuscripts, indicates that we have to play this way. Plus the language of Debussy, which doesn't really have that kind of dissonance in it. It also suggests the way it is. Okay, so if we want to play this way, there is tradition. But what does that mean? Exactly, yes. I zip my mouth about tradition, but and for me, I need some kind of not internal evidence, but some kind of external evidence to be convinced that it can be the way that the tradition, which come from Durand, and what makes sense to me is that the second, what you call natural in the manuscript, early manuscript, Durand mistook as a flat.
It's an E flat.
Yeah, you see. So then.
So they put the natural on D sharp.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you see. I think that could be. And again, maybe I'm totally wrong. but I think it's doubtful. Okay, with that, there is another problem which we cannot solve in this piece, and that has to do here. And I'll play that on the clarinet first, this way, which is, and he writes C natural. Second time he doesn't write it. So you have a C flat. Oh, this is C flat from Brahms. Oh no. Of course, that was a concert C flat, not a clarinet C flat. But could be that. It could be. Okay. And when he has it in the high register, it's the same. The first time he writes a natural. The second time, no natural. So, what do we do? And unfortunately, there is no deciding evidence for this. And this is, to me, this is interesting because so much is made out of this, where there is also external evidence, and there's a lot of evidence. Now, for here, which is a kind of dilemma we have, it's very few people mention anything about it. There is, of course, internal evidence against this, and the most important one is at the very end, where you have, and you have B flat both times. In this case, he would have had to have written a B double flat, you see. So there are mistakes of omission, yeah. And there are mistakes of omission in this piece. The most important mistake of omission happens in the reprise of the melody at rehearsal number 9, where we have this in Durand, in the piano score. And then originally, as Brahms wrote, not Brahms, what am I talking about? Oh God, Debussy, this is so stupid. He wrote that way, he didn't write anything. And then Durand put a natural there, and then, but not for the rest of it. But it's clear, and here's clear from the orchestra part, as well from the sense of harmony of what it should be that way. Okay, so there are mistakes, and there's a couple other mistakes of omission in this piece as well. So we can look at those, the C flats, as mistakes of omission, that he just didn't write them the second time. And that's not unbelievably uncommon for composers, and for all of us. If we're writing something first, the second time we write the same thing, it's easy to make a small mistake because we've already done it. Okay, so, and there's a lot of evidence for thinking that this is in fact a mistake and not simply something that Debussy wanted. And one piece of evidence is the fact that we have here all major thirds. Well, that way, not kind of a dangling, I should say, minor third. All here. But unfortunately, there's also evidence against that. And that comes from the very beginning of the piece. Because we have this. Uh-oh. We have this C to C flat. Again, this is concert pitch now. But again, this change of little kind of nuance that we have there. Plus, we have here too, exactly. We have that. You see. So, this is a case where we are confused. Personally, I still feel now that the C flats are mistakes of omission. Okay, and I won't go into all the reasons, but for me a big reason is the penmanship, I should say. Because, for instance, let's look at when he does change from there. We start with A flat to C. And then when he changes, he goes G sharp to B. Did I do that right? Yeah. That way, you see? So he's changing mode in that. So I think that the most likely he was very meticulous in the way he notated. So most likely he would have changed that to a G sharp and a B the second time, which looks much nicer than an A flat and its dangling C, which is a flat from before. Okay. There are a few other reasons I can mention, but I cannot say that the C flat is wrong. Exactly. Okay, now I quickly go to another piece.
I have a question.
Yes, please. Tell me. Yeah.
What does modern anime figure 5 measure than the 72?
Yeah, 72,
and the même mouvement after figure 6.
Yes.
Same tempo.
Okay.
Metronome 72.
What do you think about this? Même mouvement. Yeah. Well, this is also a case where we cannot know for sure what he wants. Okay? That's Moribond scherzando with the 72 is from this place here. And that makes perfect sense in that way. Then he keeps on saying that. So you have at 6, for instance, once again, a tempo, modiment animé. So then that's the same basic figure, so that makes sense. And then you have, again, même mouvement here. Oh, wait, I'm wrong. Oh, no. Oh, come on, what's wrong with me? Okay, and then he has même mouvement there, and then he has scherzando after that. Now we can interpret that in a couple ways. We can interpret that Debussy is thinking that perhaps from here there is a broadening of tempo, which then comes back. We can also think that scherzando all of a sudden is a faster tempo, since he doesn't write même mouvement scherzando.
So 5 and 6 is the 72, you think?
Yeah, well, 6 has to be 72 because it's a tempo modérément animé, which he writes at 5, the same thing. Now these tempo markings, I believe, also belong basically in the orchestral version, and they are not in his early manuscript. Let me check. That's a very interesting issue. because maybe I'm totally wrong about that. Here we go. Yeah. Here, look at the early his piano manuscript has no metronome mark.
Where?
Right here.
Yeah.
You see that?
Mm. Oh.
You understand?
Mm-hmm.
You see, so there are no metronome marks in this. They are in the orchestral version. And one just practical thing. When I play with orchestra. Ooh, did I break this? No, I don't think so. When I play with orchestra, I actually play a little slower. I don't play quite so fast. So it ends up being this part here is not outrageously quick. And I must say that through the years, maybe because I've gotten older and wiser, perhaps, although I doubt that I've gotten wiser, that I've slowed down a bit from early on, where I always thought in the beginning, when I learned this piece much too early, actually, before I was at all wise, and there I thought, wow, this is cool. You know. But if we look at Poulenc, the Sonata for Two Clarinets, the last movement, that's a quotation from the Debussy Rhapsody, which is in very fast that he writes. So, interesting. That's very external evidence. Okay, now, with that in mind, I go now to Poulenc. And here we have real problems, I think. And a big problem is that Poulenc did not really finish this piece. In 1962, and before he could actually finish a real one, I could say fair copy of this, he actually died of I think of a heart attack, I believe. So we do have issues with this piece. And the first movement, we have very serious issues with the text of the piece. And this has gone through many printings. And what happened was, all of a sudden, in the fourth printing of the piece, things were changed. Then the fifth printing, which was here, we see edited by Thea King, Georgina Debray, and Pamela Weston in English. This is, of course, Chester. It's an English company that is. They sort of put what was earlier in the piece, when it's not in this fourth printing, and that has continued until I mean I've lost track because it doesn't interest me, but the most recent printing, I believe, has gone back to that fourth printing. I actually learned from the third printing, which my father had, and that actually had other mistakes, I had to say, which I actually learned when I was little. It's another piece I learned much too early. But anyway, I'm going to go through these differences in the fourth printing. And they are very simply this. In the first movement, we have this. Here, we have normally, that was earlier, and so fifth printing. Fourth printing is that way with the E, which seems, oh, that's kind of nice. Interesting. Okay, then we have in the earlier and later printings next one. But in the fourth printing, it's changed to this. That way. And you think, oh, that's kind of interesting. Nice. And the next one. Oh, I made a mistake. Wait, let me try it, because I don't want to do this, but yeah, see, if I don't look at the music, I play better. So those are these little differences in the first movement, and we wonder, and people are very vehement about this, I must say. That's right. Yeah, no, I zip my mouth shut and then unzip it again. Okay. Now remember, Poulenc did not quite finish this piece. So these are possibilities which were in particular manuscripts of his, particular sketches. Yeah. But let's look at them carefully. Now let's look at this first. I need to do this better. And then we have, and if we do this, we get this. And that, of course, goes very clearly. But if we have this, I go to the D. Oh. The first is academic, and the second one is interesting. So what makes sense to me is that first he wants to go to G minor, so he writes an academic transition, and then he thinks, sorry. There. That. You see. Okay. Then let's move on to this next part where we have. Then we have a problem with that, which is this. You're going from the octave to the fifth, and again, just like I was mentioning about Brahms, Poulenc also was a very professional composer, and it's not something he would generally have done, I believe, and it sounds very bare when you actually do this with the piano. So, this, of course, was a possibility, but I believe it's a possibility which he actually rejected, and had he actually kept that, he would have changed the accompaniment. Because it's too, that doesn't make, it makes too little sense. That is going on. The next one, even more so, if we have this, you end, of course you can use the pedal, but you end with this. Sort of comes from a different piece, wouldn't you say? So, we need the third. There. You see. So, it says another case where Poulenc did think about that, but actually decided finally against this. Now, there's one little thing in the last movement, and that I think is simply a mistake. Not even something that he thought of and then decided not to. And that is here. If I can find it easily. I can never find anything easily. We have this first. This is that's right. We have this. in this place here, I play the clarinet. Which, in the fourth printing, is that way. Now, what is the problem with that? Is we actually have what implied parallel motion. That way. Again, I doubt it. Now you can have. Well, it's a. You know, that works because you're going in not parallel, but you're going in contrary motion for that. So that's kind of an academic version. And then what he does later with the piano, he has this. Yeah, I know. I forgot to remove the phone. As always, we get this spam call at this time. Okay, so there he actually writes this way, which is more dissonant and very interesting. So that's very possible. So it could have been possible that he would write this way, but not, you see, because it's just parallel motion you have with the piano bass. That's again not professional. So this is very simply there. There's the little dynamic changes, and I don't worry about those. Those can be a matter of choice, perhaps. But these notes in this piece, just these very few notes, which people, you know, it's like they die for. I don't know why. They actually, internal evidence, I should say, makes it clear that they cannot be correct, I think. And this is, as opposed to Debussy with that C-flat, where we don't know exactly, this is absolutely, I believe, clear. Okay, so I've gone through Poulenc, I've gone through this, and we have almost have time, right? Oh, but I wanted to do more. What time is it? Let me see.
Almost.
Oh yeah, it's almost time. Okay, so I just have to. Okay, this I will leave for next week then. In 2 weeks, it's just the end of the Copland concerto, because one important detail about the original I forgot. So you're going to have to wait one more week. So I have to do one more week of this live stream at least. Yes, and perhaps I'll do more. But next week, basically, aside from this Poulenc, not Poulenc, oh God, what am I? You see, I'm totally tongue-tied here. Aside from Copland, this little bit of Copland I will do. I will actually go into technique, how to practice, things like that. Okay? So, be well, everyone. Take care. Let's hope we survive this week. Bye-bye.